Hey, this is Chris from Leisure Games. Tonight is going to be a special look into the upcoming Bardsung release from Steamforged Games and why I'm excited about it and why I'm interested to see what the Kickstarter is actually going to look like and why it might be one of my most anticipated dungeon crawlers of 2020 or 2021. Thanks for watching. As always, opinions are my own. Let's take a look at what's out there. So, to begin with, let's take a look at the recent history of Steamforged Games and their various ups and downs. Now, they have been around on the Kickstarter scene since about 2016, as you can see here, and this graph is just going to show you sort of what I mean by that up and down track record. Dark Souls hit over 3.7 million euros in 2016 when they funded. Since then, they have failed to even get half of that in any of their other projects. Now, interestingly enough, all of these, except for sort of God tier, are other IPs that they have used, obtained the rights to, and made into tabletop games. Your Resident Evils, your Horizon Zero Dawns, your Devil May Cry. Dark Souls, although it drew in a lot of people from the video game scene, a lot of people also got turned off by just everything that transpired in terms of delivery, in terms of the final product. It was not ideal, to say the least. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because I'm going to contrast it now to the fact that they are now doing their own IP. They are creating their own game from what they want. They are not importing someone else's game. They are taking and molding and crafting it themselves in-house. So it is all in-house. There's no outside influence. They don't have to try and match up mechanics of a game that's already made to the tabletop translation or scene. And this is why I'm excited by this, is the passion that they've shown just in the previews and the information that's out there. So let's take a look. I'm going to give you a rundown quickly of what is out there, what we know, and what to expect. So first and foremost, it is Bardsung. It is their take on their own dungeon crawler. As you can see here, you have miniatures, you've got your tiles, you've got your fantasy-esque theme. It's on November 10, in case that wasn't clear. 1 to 5 players, and it's going to scale. Now, what does this mean? Why is it different? Why should you be excited if you are a fan of dungeon crawlers? What is this doing different that's going to deserve your hard-earned dollars, but also your respect? Now, first up, I want to say I'm going to go right to this, so that if you are seeing this before the launch, they are saying if you have 2,500 followers that are following and get notification at the time of launch, they're going to throw in this extra character who is some sort of combination of Centaur that they are calling the Glade Strider, Centaur, Druid-ish game. So I'm going to throw a link in the comments below, and if you're not already following, try and follow. So what I'm going to be doing here is I am going to be breaking this down, and I'll put timestamps below, so that you can see a little bit of what they've already thrown out there in terms of concepts, in terms of characters, in terms of development, so that you don't have to sift through it all yourself. I am going to break it down for you so that you don't have to do it. First up, we have the characters. Now, they've taken your typical fantasy trope and they've sort of twisted it a little bit. And so I like this. They've given them sort of different names, but they're all playing similar roles as games usually have. So they're not being terribly different, but they've gone a different style with the art. They've gone a different way in general of customizing and making these classes a little bit on their own. This is what's known as the Lightweaver. This is the version of a mage in this game. So you can see, again, they're throwing the renders out there so that you can already take a look at them. And I will say, already up front, say what you will about their games themselves, the miniatures have been top-notch across the board, and that has been one thing that has been undisputed, so you can expect that they will bring it to this Kickstarter campaign as well. So now you have their take on the rogue, known as a Night Feather. Again, it's a little bit of a twist, it's a little bit of their own take that version of it, so I like the style that's already there. Next up, you have what is a little bit of a spin on things is you have a cleric. Now this doesn't look like a lot of clerics that if you've seen other games, and you can see already on the armor and the weapon why it's called the Dawn Guard, and I'm assuming that has something to do with the allegiance. We don't have a lot of background details on a lot of these characters' stories, but I'm sure more will come with the lore that is expected with this type of game. Last up, you have what is known as the Stoneheart. Now this is sort of your dwarven stereotype. And again, I'm not sure what's going to be different about this, but hopefully they put enough into this to make it different as well. Now, they're already doing on Facebook, there's been a group going for a while that they are calling the Tavern. Again, I'll throw a link below that has more resources and more information there, but they have already had a contest on there to select a 5th different type of character. What are these other characters? They have given 4 additional choices, and they've let the community decide sort of what you're going to get. So already, if we get to 2,500, there's already going to be at least 6 player characters that you can choose from before the campaign even starts, before any stretch goals are hit. And you would have to think that the 3 that aren't chosen would be potential stretch goals. So that's already engaging the audience more so than I have seen in a lot of the other campaigns. You have your Pathkeeper, you have your Skull Splitter, you have your Lion Soul, and you have your Wild Shell. Now again, they've taken their typical tropes and sort of given their twist on them. So as I said, here are your 4 characters going from left to right. You have your Night Feather, your Light Seeker, your Dawn Guard, and your Stoneheart. The other ones, they're again typical twists on the tropes. You have your Lion Soul, which is a twist on your Paladin. You have your Wild Shell, which is a little bit of a twist on your Druid. Your Pathseeker, which is a typical twist on the Ranger. And you have the Skull Splitter, which is more of your Barbarian. I wish I would see a little bit more variance, but I'm intrigued to show us why they are different and why they are going the way they are. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. So right here, you can see the Night Feather sort of breakdown of what a character sheet is. Now they were very clear in what they want a character to be. They want it to be rewarding, they want it to be fun, especially when you level up, especially when you're building your character, because the whole point of an RPG is you're customizing the character the way you want. And so they've taken that to heart. They want to make it variety so that you are not pigeonholed into making a character a way so that that is the only way that you're going to succeed if you have that build, a power build, if you will. They also don't want to make it too overwhelming so that you have 70 choices and there's just too much to spread out through, and so you're getting analysis paralysis on that side of things. At the same time, you have the element of trying to balance being able to take that broader approach and still making it on the equal playing field as if you take a more focused approach in customizing your character towards one niche or 2 aspects of what they're really good at. The other thing which I think really speaks to the nuance, and it'll be interesting to see how they actually accomplish this, is saying you have these bigger abilities at the end of the game, but also when you get those, it's not going to completely overshadow the abilities that you have at the beginning of the game, so that it's not going to completely replace them. They're all going to have their place and time no matter what stage of the game you're at. And from any play of any game like this, whether it's D&D, the actual role-playing game, tabletop, or another tabletop RPG dungeon crawler, that is a very tough task. So you can see here, in their typical character build, they have gone with a very typical D&D sort of 6 characteristics that you can modify however you want based on what you want your character to be. They're not being pigeonholed just by the class that they are to begin with. So if you want a Night Feather that can do magic, you can have a Night Feather rogue that can do magic. If you want a cleric who is a frontline cleric, you can do that. That is a different approach than a lot of the other games, where they have said, you know what, you are this class, specialize in this class, stay in your lane. Also, here now is the actual ability side of things. Now they give you the ability to upgrade the existing abilities that you have in lieu of doing some of the other statistic modifiers if you so choose. And they give you a variety of ways of doing it. Do you want to have more of a hit modifier? Do you want to do more damage? How do you want to customize your build? And that is something I really haven't seen in too much great detail in other games. Now lastly, you can also do a third thing with your experience points, and that's you can buy new abilities. Your ability to put together combos via new abilities being added in on top of the ones you already have allows for even greater depth of exploration of how your character is different from any other character out there. Now, let's take a step back here for a second before I talk into more specifics of how the game actually plays. What about the bigger picture? Now, in one of the interviews of the live streams that they did, they have already put a few disclaimers out there about what this game is going to be. As gamers themselves, they've said, I want to be able to get this game to the table within 5 minutes. A lot of these dungeon crawlers have a whole lot of setup, a whole lot of tokens, a whole lot of fiddliness, however you want to call it. It's just hard to get terms of set up quickly. And so they've said 5 minutes flat, I want to have this on the table, ready to play. The other difference is it's procedurally generated, i.e. this is sort of your video game-esque interpretation of how the dungeon is built as you go. Meaning the dungeon is not pre-laid out in front of you like with Cthulhu Death May Die where you set up all the tiles and it's preset. No, this is you are trying to work your way across from one side of the dungeon to the other. And that is completely different too. This is not you just have to go from point A to point B and you can see everything. No, this is procedurally generated one step at a time. As you go, stuff is laid out in front of you. You can't see further ahead and you're just going to have to deal with whatever comes up. And that may be a trap, that may be a bad guys, that may be a puzzle. You don't know. But you know you have to get from A to B, and how you want to do it is up to you. Now, don't think you're going to go away with just being able to march straight across. They've already said that they're going to include dead ends, so you may have to backtrack and go a different way. So the question is, how are you going to do this? And what they've said is there are going to be two types of decks that you're going to be drawing from when you go to a new area or to a new room. One is the room deck. That is just what you would expect. That is the thing you're going to be laying down on the map. And the second is the room type. So like I said, is it going to be a puzzle? Is it going to be a trap? Is it going to be enemies? What is that going to look like? What is going on in the room? So even if you do a different mission or the same mission with a different group, you may end up with a completely different scenario than you ended up in the first time. Not to mention all the variability that I mentioned previously with the build of the actual characters and how you're able to cope with what is presented to you. So you're asking yourself then, okay, Chris, why do I care about getting from one side of the map to the other? Well, that's what the backstory is. You are in this ancient dungeon underground trying to make your way down to the bottom to defeat some sort of evil quest, something like that, that has been quote-unquote redacted in terms of what they've put out there. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make your way from one set of stairs to the next so that you can make it down another level, venturing closer and closer to your ultimate goal. Now, the caveat that I did not mention already is that when you draw that room tile in order to place it down, they are not requiring that you place it in a certain orientation. You can choose the orientation. That may be more advantageous to you or perhaps less deleterious from whatever is presented in terms of what it may be bad, and you're trying to minimize or reduce the damage that is done and how you're going to deal with it. They even go so far as to say, look, you may be able to get straight from point A to point B, but if you do, you're probably going to miss out on a lot of stuff. You're going to miss out on exploring, you're going to miss out on treasures, loot, or even special treasures or sort of Easter eggs that are hidden throughout the dungeon. So you can do it. It's sort of like, in the traditional RPG. You can stay on the main quest, and that's going to streamline things, but you're going to miss out on some of the extravagant loot and the really cool stuff that is on the side that isn't just automatically included like it is in a lot of the more traditional dungeon crawlers. So you're like, okay, Chris, so far I like what I've heard. What else new is there? So this is also different in how you take your turn order. They call it the marching order. So what does that mean? It means you have the characters laid out in a row, the good guys and the bad guys. What are you doing? You're just reading left to right. So simple, straightforward, right? Wrong. Now, from a visualization standpoint, I really like it because everybody on the table knows who is going in what order, so you can start to plan already before your turn. Now, the difference is they've already said that there are going to be triggers within that turn order based on traps, based on hazards, that may even change the turn order, or that may affect what happens between one person and the next. So that you're assuming that that bad guy, that orc, is going next. Oops, sorry, ambush, now there's 4 of him instead of just 1. Wow, that changes the people that are going immediately after him, what they're going to do. They also talk about having sort of an endpoint at the end of a round where each character has gone good guys and bad guys. Something like, oh, timed event has triggered. The room is starting to flood. What are you going to do? And it progresses by each round. So you've sort of got your timed element there as well. Again, something completely novel that I really haven't seen accomplished in a dungeon crawler in that sense yet. Now, this is the part that people are either going to like or absolutely hate. I think this is going to be pretty divisive. They say after the end of each round, you're going to Aeon's End it. And what do I mean that? If you're familiar with Aeon's End, you already know where I'm going with this. You take all of the cards from the marching order and you shuffle them back up and bridge them and lay them back out in any particular order. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like that because it's going to mean the randomization factor that you can't necessarily always mitigate. Now, I like that about Aeon's End. That is one of the huge pluses for me for Aeon's End. But I know a lot of people don't like that. So it'll be interesting to see what you can do to mitigate some of those things. And I think there are actually abilities by the heroes that will allow you to move up in the turn order or back in the turn order depending on what you want to do. Again, I think they're going back to their traditional D&D sort of roots in this sense that you're rolling the D20 for initiative. And in combat, in actual combat, it isn't you strike, I strike, you strike, I strike. You know, combat is messy. Combat is unpredictable, and I think they're trying to capture that with this mechanic. But I think, like I said, it's going to be a turnoff for some people. Some people are going to look at that and say, nope, I'm out already. So like I said, not only will you have the ability to manipulate yourself in the turn order, you have the ability to manipulate others, either your allies, but also your enemies in terms of where they're going to go. So the question is not going to be, can you mitigate it, but can you mitigate it enough, or is that going to be enough mitigation for those people that do not like the randomization? And that is something that only you can answer. But personally, I think that is a great, unique feature. I wish I could do that in Aeon's End, to be honest. That would make Aeon's End one more notch higher for me on the pedestal that I already have it on. And to see them do this in a dungeon crawler, I'd love. So we've talked about the characters enough. We've talked now just briefly about the enemies. Let's talk about those monsters for a second. What they've done is they've sort of taken the concept of monsters in the dungeon, and like I'll use my example earlier, Cthulhu Death May Die, where you're setting those guys out right on the map here and right on the map here, and you know where they are. And you go, okay, I'm going to go here. Now, they have taken it differently, and they have looked at more of the massive darkness type of approach, where you have the monsters wandering. Now, why does that matter? Now, first off, this is an additional layer on top of what's already there in terms of just pre-generated enemies. So it's not just that like every other dungeon crawler. And again, if you're sensing a theme, they are trying to stay true to their D&D roots. And they've said they want these wandering monsters not to be run-of-the-mill. They want them to strike fear in the heart of the adventurers. Sort of like the first time if you're playing D&D and all of a sudden the DM makes a dragon appear out of nowhere right in front of you guys and you're like level 5. That is the emotion they're going for. And if they can accomplish that in an RPG dungeon crawler like this, again, more props to them. I can't wait to see how they accomplish it. And again, like D&D, I'm a broken record here. They've said, you know, like a lot of other dungeon crawlers, like D&D, if you have a DM who is not on their toes or keeping adventurers on their toes, it can become very stale very quick. You know, if you can just rest wherever you want, I'm going to make camp, there's no harm, there's no foul, nothing's going to happen, who cares? You know, it becomes sort of a power build in that sense. So they've said, okay, we're going to take the tension deck that we used in Resident Evil and add that to create an additional element to strike heart in the fear of the adventurers so that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what's going to be safe or what's not. Now, again, they've taken the randomization element and added it here, so you may not like this either. And they've said, we're going to have you roll a die, and depending on what you roll, depends on what circumstances happen. Did you roll a 1 or a 2? Oh, you hear a faint screeching sound with claws being dragged against the stone in the background. You know, sort of giving it that horror element, that sort of D&D, what is around the next corner, and how am I going to deal with it if it's not something good? And as a hint, they already talk about the fact that, hey,
things are getting closer. They're going to use something called echo tokens to let you know how close things are when they're approaching like that. And the hint being close doors behind you. Doors are not just inanimate objects there for you to bust down with your barbarian or your fighter. They are there to use as obstacles. And I like that because I don't see that in a lot of other games. It reminds me of Machina Arcana, where you are more trying to outrun the map and the monsters that are on that previous map than you are necessarily trying to defeat them in that sense. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, that these monstering wanderers aren't there just to nip at your heels and strike at your Achilles when you're not looking. They don't give you treasure. You just got to make sure you don't get killed by them. You're not getting rewarded. Your reward is not dying an early death in the dungeon. So if you're looking, and I know a lot of people complain about this, oh, Madara, oh, it was way too easy. It was way too easy to game it. Oh, this is just, I've never lost in Soul and Sword and Sorcery. That sort of thing. That's why they're making this type of element for players like you out there. So we've talked about the monsters, we've talked about the enemies. How are you going to kill them? What is going to be different about this attack cycle? Because other criticisms in a lot of other games is, it's a hack and slash. It's the same thing with D&D. You move up to the enemy, I attack, you attack, I attack, you attack, I attack, you fall down dead. How is it going to be different than that? And how are you going to make it more interesting, especially to create an element of peril while you're actually attacking so that every combat is something where there is nothing guaranteed? Well, the first element of that is, frankly speaking, positioning. Where you are positioned matters in this game. Now, they have taken away the grid. They have gotten rid of the grid. They've tossed it out the window, and they're using zones. So you have zones that are next to each other in a non-linear, non-patterned, in terms of straight lines sort of situation. The other thing is there's something called aspect cards that they really haven't dove too much into that modify both the enemy's behaviors, their tactics, basically their AI. And they have also said during one of the live streams that enemies are going to develop enmity towards you, meaning you fought them previously. If they escaped or you killed some of their comrades, they are going to go after you more specifically. Maybe they're going to go after the paladin in your group. Maybe they're going to go after the knight, the rogue. Maybe they're going to go after one particular person who killed more of their fellow kin than previously. There's a way to remember that and recollect that and to change the tactics than what was known before. So you can't just have one person tank, because the next time you fight that type of enemy, that guy is going to get surrounded and just smashed because they're going to remember who did them the most damage in the past. Let's dive a little bit deeper in those aspect cards. They have given us a little bit of insight in what to expect. So the example they use is, let's take a group of enemies that we previously defeated, these reavers, these roamers, these bandits within the tunnels, and all of a sudden we draw an aspect card, and what has changed about them? Maybe their swords are poisoned this time. Maybe now it's an ambush so that there's twice as many as there should have been. Whatever it may be, and they say that they have come up with a numerous amount of these sort of adaptations in each encounter, enough to keep you guessing, enough to require you to adapt to each individual situation, rather than just say, okay, the reavers, we fought them last time, this is what we did, repeat, win. So what else is there? I mentioned earlier that sometimes you walk into a room and you do not find an enemy. You don't find a battle or combat to be had. So what else is there? And they've said, look, there's going to be weird stuff, there's going to be terrain, there's going to be obstacles, and there's going to be puzzles. And they're going to have timing. So is it going to be an immediate effect? You walk in, you trip a tripwire, and boom, a fireball goes off? Or is it going to be delayed, meaning, okay, like I mentioned earlier, the flood is slowly increasing now on the whole floor, and you have to find the exit to the floor before the flood level rises and you all suffocate and drown? Or is it just going to be delayed? Hey, in 2 more rooms, this is what happens. Who knows what that could be? Or, like I said earlier, the echoes in the distance, something crashes, and you hear something like that, and it's going to get you in, 2 rounds or something. That is to say, not all of these are negative either. This is where they're also throwing in your NPCs, your non-playable characters, as reoccurring interactions that you'll be able to have throughout the game. So if you interact with a goblin trader who you find at one of the top levels, depending on how you interact with him, what happens, whether you kill him, whether you steal from him, whether you mug him, whether you just treat him nicely, it may have ramifications further on in the game. Now, again, here is the Kickstarter preview page to circle up and to sort of begin winding down this video. There are over 5,600 followers already, so we're already going to get that extra 6th character that's going to be added. And that's great. They've added the Wild Shell as the 5th character that was voted on by the people in the tavern, the Facebook group. Now, everything I have seen, everything that has been shown, they have done their homework. They are trying to impress, and they are not just trying to raise money here. They're trying to make a really good, solid quality game, it seems like. And the fact that they're putting so much information out there beforehand really speaks to the heart of it. I know that they are going to be doing demos or have the availability to do some demos in Tabletopia. I'm hopefully going to be doing a Tabletopia demo with some of the designers later this week. So if I'm able to do that, I can at least try and record some of it or give you my thoughts and impressions afterwards. Overall, I'm really excited about this game because I think they're trying to do unique things. They're trying to do different things, but they're also trying to stay true to the tabletop gaming scene, the RPG scene, and they just want to make a really good project as colleagues in this hobby. Now, Beasts of War, I'm going to pull up their page here. They have a first look at what the package is actually going to look like. So you've got a few of the wandering monsters that I mentioned there, and you've also got your price point. So you can see some of these models up closer a little bit. I mean, this just looks fantastic. And again, like I said, Steamforged Games has always done good miniatures, so I have no worries about it from that side of things. What are you getting? You're getting 66 miniatures, you're getting 5 heroes, you're getting the Kickstarter exclusive hero, 52 enemies, 5 wandering monsters, 4 bosses just in the base pledge. And they're saying it is $99. So for a base pledge, Mark, that's not too bad. Now, the interesting thing is going to be, again, you know, as cool as this is, what is the expansion ratio going to look like? What is the price point going to be on other expansions? Because you saw with Horizon Zero Dawn, is it going to be more like that? Or is it going to be more like Devil May Cry, where they did sort of 3 included ones with the stretch goals of what they were, plus the one other add-on? That's going to be the make it or break it for me, what the price point is for those and how many of those I get. Because I am a day one backer. I am going to be one of the first backers probably. I am really intrigued to see what it actually plays like. So I'm going to be digesting as much information as I can about this game. Hopefully, it intrigues you enough so that you check it out as well. So that's it, Bardsung. Hopefully this gets uploaded in time, and so it'll be hopefully just over 24 hours before this launches by the time you're viewing this. And if this is making you as excited as I am, I mean, you can see hopefully now why this is one of my more anticipated dungeon crawlers that is going to come out in the next year. And if they do a really good job with this, I can't wait to see. And I think it's going to sort of set the tone for Monster Hunter, which they have the IP for already, where you can kind of be a little bit more sandboxy. You can kind of take some of your own ideas. You don't have to necessarily have set mechanics like, you know, Resident Evil or Devil May Cry or Horizon Zero Dawn, where you're trying to stay as true as you can. Monster Hunter is going to be a little bit more open world in that sense. So if they can apply what they've learned here and translate it into that game as well, Steamforged Games has a very bright future in terms of the funding. I can't wait to see what else they have in store, because you know you're going to get more heroes, more wandering monsters, more bosses, expansions. Show me what you got. And I want to see, and I'm probably going to comment on the price points, because initially I'm up for it, but we'll see if that changes. I hope not, because I'm really interested. The only other question is just when. And I think, judging by the amount of stuff, hopefully they've got their ducks in a row on that side of things, but I think you're going to be seeing this early, maybe second quarter of 2022, just based on how many other projects they're still in the process of sort of finishing. And I don't say that as a negative, I just say that as a realistic Kickstarter expectation, knowing how many miniatures and everything that goes in with the timing of those. So that is Bardsung by Steamforged Games. If that interests you, check it out with the links below. Hopefully, like, comment, subscribe. As always, these are my own opinions, my own interpretations. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Stay classy out there.